I don't think it's a good idea if you come this year. That's what my son said. No hesitation. No apology. Just certainty. Before I tell you how I quietly ended their dream home, let me know where you're watching from. And subscribe if you believe dignity matters, even when you're old, even when you're their mother. He called while I was slicing apples for pie, said it would just be Callie's parents this year. They've flown in from Denver. We want to keep it small. You get it, right? I pressed the phone to my ear with a sticky hand. Juice was running down my wrist. Red peel clung to the blade. 68 Thanksgivings. 35 in my home. I basted, I carved, I served. Daniel always got the drumstick. Now there's not even a seat. I understand, I whispered. Flat, like dough that's been overworked. Thanks for being so gracious, he said. Love you, Mom. He hung up. I stood still in the quiet. He didn't even ask if I had plans. The radiator clanged behind me, too loud, too alone. I looked around the kitchen. Linoleum we chose together. New fridge I helped finance. Cabinets I painted myself while he was still jobless, starting out. They couldn't get the mortgage on their own. I signed. Then I paid, every month. On the 15th. For 6 years. I never asked for credit. Didn't need a thank you. Just wanted to be part of the family I helped build. But this year, I'm not part of it. So maybe my money shouldn't be either. The November envelope was still taped to the fridge. Due in 3 days. I peeled it off slowly. The tape tore, loud, clear. I poured a mug of cider, the kind I used to serve with cinnamon sticks. Now it came from the microwave. I raised it to the empty room, to the countertop I never eat at, to the table I'll sit at alone. Cheers, Gloria. Let's see what happens when the next check doesn't come. It used to be different. I remember the year Daniel was 9. His cheeks still round, missing 2 front teeth. He'd helped me mash the sweet potatoes. Barely tall enough to see over the counter. Kept sneaking marshmallows when he thought I wasn't looking. Don't eat 'em all. Turkey boy, I teased. He giggled sticky-fingered and hugged me around the waist with his whole heart. The radio played soft jazz in the background. Maria was still alive then. She stood at the sink, humming, shaping her cornbread stuffing like it was sacred. That kitchen smelled of cinnamon, butter, and her perfume. Lily of the Valley. Daniel had drawn place cards that year, everyone's name in crooked marker letters. Mine read, Queen of Pies. After dinner, he climbed onto the couch beside me, curled up like a cat. Said, "This was the best day, Mama." I held him close. Thought, he'll always remember this now. I'm not sure he even does. The kitchen is quiet now. No music, no laughter, just the faint hum of the fridge and a bowl of apples going brown. He used to run to me. Now he edits me out of the picture. And I just let it happen. Until today. Their house has my fingerprints all over it. The oak dining table. I found it at a consignment store. Callie said it was too traditional. Daniel said nothing. I paid for it anyway. The silk curtains in their front room. $600 from my retirement fund. Callie wanted privacy. Said the neighbor stared too much. Even the backsplash in the kitchen. Callie posted a poll on Facebook. White tile or subway gray. I voted. Then I paid the invoice. But now I'm not invited to the table I bought, beneath the lights I paid to have installed, in the home my name never touched. I saw a photo once. Callie posted it on Instagram. Thanksgiving 3 years ago. She'd tagged every family member, except me. My pie was on the table. But my name wasn't in the caption. Invisible, you can give someone everything, and still be written out of the story. I sat down at my kitchen table. Old pine, scratched in the corners, still mine. The fridge hummed. My setter had gone cold. Didn't matter. Somewhere across town, they're setting place cards. Roasting a turkey. Playing polite for guests who never paid a single month of their mortgage. And me, I'm here. Watching the silence settle. But silence doesn't mean surrender. Not this time. I went to the hall closet. Top shelf, old shoebox, dusty from years. Inside my ledger, every payment, every check stub, stacked in neat little months. 6 years, 12 months a year. Each line said the same thing. Wells Fargo mortgage. $125 from my account. Memo Daniel Franklin. I used to write little notes next to them. For them. Of home is peace. They'll never worry like we did. I ran my fingers across the ink. It had faded in spots, but not as much as my place in their lives. Daniel never asked for this, but he never told me to stop either. And Callie, she never once said thank you. Only we're a little short again, Gloria. It'd be great if you could help with the property taxes, too. I pulled out the most recent bill, November. Due Friday. No one called to remind me. No one asked if I was okay. They just assumed. Assumed I'd keep giving. Assumed I didn't need a seat at the table to keep paying for the roof above it. I looked at the checkbook, then at the pen. My hand hovered. I thought about the apple pie still sitting on the counter. The one I'd baked for a dinner I wasn't invited to. I closed the checkbook. Walked it back to the closet, tucked the box away. Gently, but firmly. Then I turned off the kitchen light. Maybe they'll notice when the payment doesn't come. Maybe they won't. But this time, I'm not disappearing quietly. I'm stopping the story right where they tried to write me out. Would you keep paying just to keep peace? 1 Yes, family comes first. 2 No dignity comes first. The first Thanksgiving without Henry felt like a room with no walls. Everything looked the same, but nothing held. Daniel was only 10. Too thin, too quiet. He didn't cry much after the funeral, but his silence was heavy, like someone holding their breath for weeks. That morning, I found him in the kitchen, standing on a stool in his socks, flour on his nose, trying to read the pie crust directions. Got a plan there, chef? I asked. He shrugged. I thought I could help. The window fogged from the oven heat. Outside, the trees were bare. Cold Missouri wind rattled the glass, but inside the kitchen, there was warmth. I gave him a smile. Then you better wash your hands first. He hummed while rolling out dough. Pressed too hard, then too soft. The crust was lopsided. Didn't matter. We filled it with sliced apples and cinnamon. He tried to braid the edges. Made a mess of it. Still, he beamed when we slid it into the oven. Later, he set the table all by himself. Mismatched plates, 2 cloth napkins, 1 paper. He folded mine into a triangle and placed it beside my fork like a gift. I want today to be nice, Mama, he said. For you. I pulled the chair out slow, sat down with my hands still damp from washing greens. That's the best gift I could ask for. He grinned. A little gap still in his front teeth. His hair sticking up in 3 directions. Dinner was quiet. We didn't say grace out loud, but we said it in our own way. Just the 2 of us. Pie cooling on the sill, the heater humming steady behind the stove, and for that one evening, we felt whole again. After that first Thanksgiving, we started building our own traditions. Not big ones, just small things that kept us together. Daniel loved pumpkin pancakes, so every year on Black Friday, I'd wake up early and make a batch with extra cinnamon. He'd stumble in, still in pajamas, hair wild, rubbing his eyes. Smells like a bakery, he'd mumble. I lived for that. We didn't have much, just a modest house with squeaky floors and a heater that rattled whenever it snowed. But I kept it warm, I kept it full. I worked double shifts through winter, so he could go to soccer camp in June, said no to new shoes, so he could say yes to band trips and science fairs. Every achievement, every medal, every report card, I framed like gold. He'd hug me and say, "You're the best, Mama." Even I'd believe it, even when I was so tired, I forgot how to sit still. But something shifted as he got older. By 16, he'd stopped joining me in the kitchen, said he had homework, said he was tired. He still ate the pie, still accepted the gifts, but the sparkle in his eyes when I entered a room, it dimmed. At first, I told myself it was growing pains. Boys pull away, they come back, it's natural, but the distance stayed. Then it deepened, from words, to silence, to forgetting. The year he went to college, he forgot to call me on Thanksgiving, said later he'd gotten busy. I said it was fine. Of course it was fine. What else could I say? I didn't want to seem ungrateful. After all, he still came home for Christmas. He still brought laundry and stories. I was still needed. I'd just not always seen. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug. The pie dish from that first Thanksgiving was tucked behind a stack of mixing bowls. I hadn't used it in years. Next to it, a photo frame with Daniel at age 10, grinning, flour on his chin, tiny hand holding up a crooked pie. I ran my thumb along the edge of the frame. The glass felt cool, too clean, untouched. That year, he'd called me Queen of Pies, had even drawn a crown on my name tag. I still kept it, folded in a recipe book I hadn't opened since 2015. Sometimes, I wonder what he remembers, or if he remembers at all. The kitchen clock ticked steady overhead, a faint hum behind the quiet. I glanced at the window, a gray sky, no movement, not even wind. And in that stillness, I thought, maybe the only thing worse than being forgotten is realizing you forgot yourself along the way. The grocery store was quieter than usual. Thanksgiving morning, and most folks were already basting turkeys or setting tables full of polished silverware. I walked the aisles slowly, pushing a half-empty cart. 1 can of cranberry sauce, a small turkey breast, boxed stuffing, just add water, no fresh herbs, no big pie pans, no marshmallows, nothing that needed sharing. Near the dairy aisle, I heard a voice behind me. Well, if it isn't Gloria Franklin. I turned. It was June Barlow, my old neighbor from 2 streets over. She wore her usual oversized scarf and too much perfume. Her cart was packed high with yams, greens, pies. "Look at you," she smiled. "Heading to your son's, I bet. That big house near Brookside, right?" I smiled. "Too fast? Yep," I said. "Just grabbing last-minute things." She leaned in, lowered her voice. "You're lucky, dear. My daughter's spending the holiday with her in-laws in Topeka. Just me and the cat today." I nodded, offering that hug strangers give when they don't know where to touch. "Enjoy your meal," I said, then pushed my cart away before my eyes betrayed me. I stood in line for checkout behind a teenage boy, buying 2 frozen pizzas and a 6-pack of root beer. The cashier was humming a Christmas song. It wasn't even noon. When I got back in my car, I didn't start the engine right away. I watched families stream through the lot, arms full of pies, flowers, babies in fleece hats. And I sat there with a single bag in my passenger seat. I'd told June I was going to my son's, told her what she wanted to believe. What I wanted to believe, but I was headed home, to a table for one, a pie I wouldn't finish, and a silence that grew louder every time someone assumed I was loved. I started the engine. The heater blew cold air at first, then slowly warmed. Same as me, maybe some lies were just insulation, thin, flammable, but warm for a minute. And maybe that was enough to keep driving. The house was still. Not quiet, still. Like it was waiting for something that wouldn't come. I unpacked the groceries, lined them on the counter. There weren't many, didn't need many. I preheated the oven, set the turkey breast in a small pan, sprinkled dried rosemary from a jar that expired last spring. Didn't matter. I boiled water for stuffing. It smelled like cardboard and memory. Opened the cranberry sauce, the kind that slides out whole, ribbed and jiggling like it's embarrassed to be here. The table only had 1 plate, no centerpiece, no folded napkin, just me. I poured water into the same glass I used every morning. It was chipped near the rim. I drank from the other side. Dinner was ready in 25 minutes. I sat down, fork in hand, no one across from me, just the ticking wall clock and a flickering bulb I hadn't replaced. The turkey was dry, the stuffing bland, the cranberry sauce too sweet. I ate it anyway. Halfway through, I paused, looked up. The chair across from mine, the one Daniel used to climb into, with his elbows on the table, talking about dinosaurs and soccer cards, was still. Same wood, same cushion, just older. Like me, I pushed the plate away, appetite gone. The kitchen light buzzed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once. Then nothing. I got up, boxed the leftovers, washed the pan. I wiped the counter twice. Then once more. My hands needed something to do. In the living room, the family photo wall looked dusty. Daniel's wedding portrait hung crooked. I didn't fix it, I just stared. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't sure if straightening it would feel like clinging or letting go. I turned off the lights, slipped into my bedroom with the same slow hush I used when Daniel was little, and I didn't want to wake him. Except now, no one was sleeping. No one was here at all. As I slid under the quilt, I thought, they're not erasing me. I've been fading all on my own. The envelope came just after 8. I heard the mail slot click, followed by a soft shuffle as the letter slid across the floor. I was still in my robe, coffee untouched, heat from the radiator just beginning to reach my toes. I picked it up. Standard white, thin paper, windowed address. Wells Fargo, Mortgage Services. Not addressed to me, but the street number was close enough, probably meant for a neighbor. Still, my hands tightened around the edges. That name used to show up every single month on my statements. I stood there for a moment, letter in hand, as the coffee grew cold behind me. Then I walked to the hallway closet. Top shelf, plastic bin, blue lid, labeled, Taxes Daniel. I hadn't touched it in almost a year. It was heavier than I remembered. I brought it to the kitchen table, set it down like something sacred or dangerous. Inside, file folders, bank printouts, sticky notes with dates and amounts. First transfer June 2017, $250 memo. Niors, 2nd July, same amount, memo or jumjus OA plus August, September, October, On and on 6 years, dozens of payments, each one neat, labeled, organized. I flipped through them slowly. My breath grew shallow of $250 a month for 72 months, the $90,000 before taxes. And that didn't count the property taxes I paid in 2020 when Callie said she was too overwhelmed to deal with the paperwork, or the new HVAC install, or the school donations in the kids' names, because they wanted to keep up with the other parents. All written in my careful cursive. All paid from my account. I was never asked, never pressured. But they never said no either. Never once told me, "You've done enough." And I never asked for thanks. Didn't want a medal, but I had assumed, foolishly, that this meant something. That I was part of their foundation, not just the checkbook under it. I closed the last folder, pressed my palms flat against the table. It felt cool, smooth, clean. Then the thought came, quiet and sharp, this wasn't help. It was silence they cashed in on. I reached for a pad of lined paper, yellow, curled at the corners. Same kind I used for grocery lists, doctor appointments. But this wasn't errands. This was proof. I dated the top at November 25, then underlined it. Line 1 June 15, 2017 once 251st mortgage payment line 2, July 15 Mors 25808 escrow bumpa line 3. Of August 15 Forst 150 mortgage support by line 8 my hand started to cramp. I shook it out, took a sip of cold coffee, then kept going. Some entries needed notes. December 2018 extra 400 for holiday gifts of April 2019 tax penalty covered. May 2020 Kender 3 200 HVAC install paid in full. I wrote slow, careful, like every dollar deserved a moment of silence. I reached 47 lines before stopping. The numbers blurred. My eyes burned. The page was full, so I turned it over and kept going. It wasn't until page 3 that I hesitated. A March 2022 school fundraiser, a $300 donation in my name. I remembered that one. Callie had emailed me a PayPal link and said, "We're trying to hit our goal fast. Would love if you joined." I did. Never heard back. No thank you note. Not even my name on the banner. Daniel sent a text later, "Appreciate the help, Mom," 2 sentences. No punctuation. I had responded with a heart emoji. Pathetic. I looked at the growing stack of papers. My handwriting slanted more on each page, more desperate, more human. I'd kept their roof from collapsing, their credit afloat, their kids in matching backpacks and holiday photos. And not once did anyone ask, "How are you managing, Mom? Do you have enough left for yourself?" I rubbed my palm, smudging ink across one of the totals. If I died tomorrow, if I slipped on the porch or stopped waking up, would Daniel even know how much I gave? Would anyone? I stared at the list, at the math of love, and the silence it had purchased. Then I reached for another sheet, clean and blank. Dated it. December 15 Jewelers canceled. I didn't hesitate. Didn't cross it out. I didn't need a reason anymore. I folded all the papers into a manila folder, tied it shut with a rubber band, slipped it into my fireproof box, next to the deed to my own home, my living will, and a photo of Daniel at age 10. The house creaked as I stood. It wasn't a sound of collapse, just the old bones shifting before something changes. The park was almost empty. Late November in Missouri meant bare trees, wind in short bursts, and the occasional stubborn leaf dragging across the path. I wrapped my scarf tighter and followed the curved trail past the duck pond. The benches were cold, but I picked one with sun. Let it soak into my coat. From here, I could see a young couple tossing a football with their son. He was maybe 8, missing a front tooth, laughing so hard he fell in the grass. It wasn't envy I felt. Not quite, more like recognition. Like remembering an old song you can't sing anymore. I pulled out a sandwich I'd packed. Just peanut butter on wheat. It stuck to the roof of my mouth, but gave my hands something to do. A little girl wandered over from the playground. She had curls like a halo, and a sparkly pink jacket that caught every beam of sunlight. She didn't ask. Just sat beside me. Her legs swung back and forth, but didn't touch the ground. I glanced around. No panic from the parents. Just a nod from a woman near the slide. The girl looked up at me. "Are you someone's grandma?" I smiled. "Sort of." She squinted. "Sort of. I have grandkids," I said. "But I don't see them much." "Oh," she said, then unwrapped a piece of candy. Offered me one. I took it. Grape. Not my favorite. Still, I placed it in my mouth like it was communion. She swung her legs again, then tilted her head. "Where's your family today?" The question landed quiet, simple, undeniable. I looked out over the pond. A duck flapped once, then settled. "At home, I guess." The girl nodded like that made sense. then stood. Okay, bye. And just like that, she skipped off, trailing glitter and noise like all children do. I stared at the space where she'd been. It still held warmth, not because of the question, but because she asked it, because she saw me. Most people didn't anymore. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I dropped my keys into the dish by the door and slipped out of my coat, hung it where Henry's used to hang. The silence wasn't heavy tonight. It was just still. I walked to the kitchen, set the candy wrapper on the counter, and poured myself a glass of water. No cider, no tea, just plain water. I carried it to the living room, sat on the edge of the couch, and let the room hold me. Outside, the last of the sun made long shadows on the floor. Inside, nothing moved. The family photo wall loomed across from me. I didn't get up, didn't reach for it, just sat. My hands drifted to the side table. Top drawer, old notes, unused coupons, and a folded piece of yellow paper tucked behind a stray birthday card. I opened it carefully. It had been folded so long the creases felt like bones. Daniel had written it in 3rd grade. Pencil, all caps. "You are my home." He'd drawn a stick figure of us, me in an apron, him with a backpack, a big heart above our heads. I stared at it, felt something shift. It wasn't pain this time, not grief, just space, a space where love used to sit and where something else might grow again if I let it. I looked around the room. It was mine. Every lamp, every chair, every nail in the wall. Mine, not borrowed, not tied to someone else's comfort, not conditional. I set the note down beside me, then I walked to the roll, top desk in the corner, opened it, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and a blue pen. I hadn't written a letter in years. Everything was email, quite disposable. But this needed my hand. I didn't know exactly what I was writing, not yet. But the first line came easy. "I am not invisible." At the second took longer. My hand hovered, then moved. "And I will not ask to be seen." I kept going, line by line, word by word, not begging, not blaming, just telling the truth in my own voice. At last, the phone rang at 10:10 a.m. I almost didn't answer. The number was familiar, but I wasn't in the mood to be reminded I'd been left out. Still, habit is a strong thing. I picked it up before the 3rd ring. "Hi, Gloria." Callie's voice was as bright as always, like she'd just stepped out of a Pinterest ad, warm, coated in cinnamon and PR training. "Hope I'm not calling too early." "No," I said. Flat, neutral. She launched right in. "So, we're having a little get-together tomorrow. Just family and a few of Michael's work friends. Kind of a pre-holiday thing." I didn't say anything, just listened. "We weren't sure about Thanksgiving plans," she continued, "but Daniel figured we'd do something small, keep it light. With everything going on." Everything. She didn't explain. Didn't have to. I could feel where this was going. "We're making the turkey," she said, "and my mom's doing green bean casserole. But everyone keeps asking about your apple pie." My hand tightened around the phone, so I was wondering, would you maybe be able to send one over? There it was. Not an invitation, not even a polite lie about hoping I'd stop by. Just a request. For pie. The line crackled slightly. I could hear kids in the background. Laughter, a cartoon playing, the easy rhythm of a home preparing to host. A home I wasn't welcome in. "Of course, only if it's not too much trouble," Callie added. Her voice softened. Performative. "You know how everyone just loves your crust. It's kind of tradition at this point." I let the silence stretch. Watched dust float in the light by the window. It was quiet here. "Still, I can do that," I said finally. My voice didn't shake, didn't rise, it just landed, like a stone in water. Callie clapped. Actually clapped. "Oh, thank you, Gloria. You're just the best." "Let me know when it's ready, and we'll send someone to pick it up." The line clicked off before I could say goodbye. I stared at the screen for a long time. After it went black, she didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask if I was joining. Didn't even pretend I had a seat at the table. Just send the pie. Like that's all I ever was. The hands that baked. The name behind the recipe. Not the person. Not the woman who kept the lights on, kept the fridge stocked, kept the house standing when no one else could. I set the phone down gently and walked to the kitchen. Opened the cupboard. Pulled out the pie dish. The old one. The one Daniel used to help butter when he was 9. It felt heavier than I remembered. I took my time making the pie. Not out of love, not out of nostalgia, out of intention. Measured the flour with a steady hand. Cut the butter cold and sharp, no shortcuts. No emotion. I'd made this recipe more times than I could count. I could do it blind. But today, I watched every movement, like I was studying what it meant to be erased politely. I peeled the apples slow. The skins curled into tight red ribbons on the cutting board. Added cinnamon, sugar, a touch of lemon like always. But I didn't taste it, didn't need to. The dough was perfect. Even edges, no frills, no braids like Daniel used to try and twist. Just clean folded truth. I rolled the crust into the dish, smoothed it flat, pressed it with my knuckles. This wasn't baking. It was carving something out of myself and handing it over. While it baked, the smell filled the kitchen, warm, thick, familiar. The kind that made people feel safe, welcomed. I didn't feel any of that, not this time. When the timer rang, I pulled it out, set it on the cooling rack. Golden, cracking slightly near the edges. Still beautiful, still mine. I found a clean white box in the pantry, lined it with foil, let the pie settle in the middle like a jewel. Then I walked to my desk, opened the drawer, took out a small notepad. No greeting, no signature, just 5 words. You forgot who baked it. I folded the note, slipped it beneath the pie, just off center, so someone would see it only if they looked. I closed the box, taped it shut, and wrote their last name across the top in my neat, careful cursive. Then I set it on the counter and waited. Not for them, not for thanks, for the doorbell, for the handoff, for the final, quiet delivery of all that went unseen. And when it left my hands, so did something else. Not sadness, not anger, just wait. And I let it go. If you've ever baked something for people who stopped calling you family. If your love was served warm and received cold. Tell me, would you still send the pie, or would you keep what's left of yourself for yourself? The pie was gone, picked up by a teenager in a puffer jacket and earbuds. He didn't say a word, just nodded when I handed him the box, then turned back to his car. Didn't even glance inside. I stood at the doorway longer than I should have, watching the car pull away. The taillights blinked left. Then it was gone. I closed the door, didn't lock it, just walked back to the kitchen and sat. The phone buzzed an hour later. Voicemail, no ring, just a missed call from Daniel. I stared at the screen. He rarely left voicemails. Said it was old-fashioned, said, just text me, Mom. But this time, he left a message. I pressed play, held the phone to my ear. His voice was quiet, not sleepy, not rushed, careful. Hey, Mom, I just wanted to say thanks for the pie. A pause. Callie said it was great. You always get the crust just right. Another pause. Longer. I'm sorry we didn't invite you this time. It's just, you know how hectic it's been. That word, hectic, landed soft but wrong. Like a napkin folded over a bruise. He cleared his throat. I heard voices in the background. Kids maybe. Maybe not. Anyway, just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you. Click. That was it. No, talk soon. No, love you. Just, I appreciate you. Like a manager thanking a temp after a shift. I set the phone down. The message sat in my chest like a button sewn too tight. I replayed it. Twice. Listening not for what was said, but what wasn't. There was something in his tone. Not guilt. Not warmth. Distance. So measured it felt rehearsed. I tried to remember the last time he called me first. Or the last time he used my name without needing something. Mum. Used to be my favorite word. Now it felt like a code to get the goods without the guilt. I walked to the hallway, past the mirror, glanced at myself. Same gray sweater, same tired eyes, same face they used to kiss goodbye on school mornings. But something in me had shifted. The boy who once left me hand-drawn cards, who once cried when I scraped my knee, and was not the man who left that message. And for the first time, I wondered, was he ever? Or have I been talking to a version of him I kept alive alone? That night, I opened the cedar chest. It lived at the foot of my bed, a worn, nicked at the edges. Inside, memories sealed in paper, ink, and old glue. I hadn't looked through it in years. Not since before Maria passed. Not since life got too busy to sit with the past. But tonight, the voicemail still humming in my ears, I needed to see the boy I remembered. I pulled out the manila envelopes, one by one. Inside, birthday cards with scrawled letters, construction, paper colleges, crayon drawings of our house with hearts in the windows. A Valentine from 2nd grade Ev. You make the best cookies and you're the best mom in the world. A Mother's Day letter. If I had to pick any mom, I'd still pick you. I smiled, but the smile didn't stay long. I flipped through more. Notes from summer camp, thank you cards from college breaks, Each one shorter, less color, less him. By the time he was 25, the notes had turned into reminders, rent's tight, we'll pay back soon. Seth, can you help with car insurance this month? I found a drawing from when he was 5. He'd made us both superheroes. Me with a cape, holding a pie in one hand and a lightning bolt in the other. Daniel had written at the top, "My mom saves everything." I read it again, not everyone, everything. It was supposed to be sweet. Back then, I laughed at the grammar. But now, I felt something twist. Was that who I'd become? Not the woman he came to, but the one who kept things running, held the pieces, fixed what broke. Even now, after the pie, after the silence, after the voicemail that wasn't quite a thank you, I was sitting here, trying to hold him in place through paper and ink. My fingers hovered over the drawing. The cape, the pie, the lightning bolt. I wasn't sure I still had any of them, and I wasn't sure he ever saw them to begin with. Maybe all those years, I was building a story on my own. One where love always circled back. Where sacrifices were noticed, and the child you raised came home wiser. But what if I'd been wrong? What if I'd built it all on a version of Daniel that only ever lived in these boxes? I folded the paper slowly, put it back, closed the chest, sat on the bed, bare feet on the cold floor. I could still hear his voice. "I appreciate you." Appreciate. As if I were a set of good dishes, a recipe that turned out right, a service rendered. I looked toward the dark hallway, the quiet, and thought maybe the boy who drew capes never imagined his hero would need saving too. I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet in the way only old houses can be, where every tick of the clock sounds like a question you're not ready to answer. I lay still, watching shadows stretch across the ceiling. The pie box was gone. The voicemail played. The drawing folded back into the chest, but none of it felt finished. I sat up, swung my feet to the floor. Cold met skin. It grounded me. I walked to the kitchen without turning on the lights. The moon was enough. It lit the linoleum, the sink, the photo frame above the stove. Henry, in his uniform, smiling like he knew a secret he never quite shared. I poured a glass of water. Didn't drink it. Just held it, feeling the chill in my palm. That night, the one before his heart gave out, we'd sat on this very couch. He was tired, but not yet sick, looking. He'd pulled off his boots, rubbed his temples, and said, "Don't let them mistake your kindness for obligation." I remember laughing. "You think I'm not tough enough?" He shook his head. "No, I think you are. But I also think they'll take until you forget you can say no." At the time, it felt like a warning meant for some far-off future, one I'd never reach. But now, his words echoed like a bell rung from another lifetime. I leaned against the counter, let the weight settle in my chest. He was right. I had given and given until giving became my identity. And then, when I stopped, even briefly, I didn't recognize the quiet that followed. Not because it was empty, but because it was mine. The voicemail had shown me that. Daniel didn't say, "I miss you." Didn't say, "We should talk." He said, "I appreciate you." Like I'd dropped off groceries, like I'd changed a tire, like I was optional. I took a sip from the glass. The water tasted sharp, real. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel guilty for asking what I was worth. I just felt awake. Dawn came slow. I sat on the porch, wrapped in Henry's old robe, a mug of coffee warming my hands. The sky was still unsure, not quite morning, but no longer night. A pair of cardinals darted past the feeder. The wind carried that November scent, cold earth, damp leaves, a whisper of winter coming. Across the street, a neighbor dragged 2 bins to the curb. His breath fogged in the chill, a normal Thursday. But I felt different, not better, not lighter, just clearer. I went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, pulled out the notepad I used for grocery lists, wrote Daniel's name at the top, paused, my hand hovered. So many times I'd started letters to him and never finished. This one had to be different. Not a plea, not a scolding, just a truth. I started simply. Daniel, there's a lot I've wanted to say, as most of it I swallowed, thinking silence would keep the peace. But peace doesn't come from pretending. The pen moved steady now. I've spent years trying to support you, thinking it would buy us closeness. But love doesn't work like that. And lately, I've felt more like a utility bill than a mother. I paused, staring at the steam curling from my mug. It's not the pie, or the voicemail, or even the missing invite. It's the pattern. The expectation that I'll always say yes, no matter how it makes me feel. My fingers tightened around the pen. That's not love. That's obligation. And I've decided I won't carry that anymore. I let the weight of the words settle. Then added, you're still my son, I still love you, but I need space where I'm not the only one showing up. I signed my name. No, love Mom, not this time. I folded the note carefully, slipped it into an envelope, wrote his name in full on the front. Daniel James Harper. He'd always hated when I used his full name. Said it made him feel like he was in trouble. Maybe this time, he wasn't. Maybe I was just done pretending everything was fine. I placed the envelope by the door. I'd mail it later. For now, I sat back down with my coffee, watched the sun edge higher over the rooftops. The porch was quiet again, but this time it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I waited until noon to make the call. Not out of fear. Just routine. I had folded the laundry, swept the back porch, and finally sat down at the dining table with my bank folder and a fresh legal pad. The hold music played, soft piano. Too cheerful. My fingers tapped the table. Once, then again. Thank you for waiting. This is Camille. How can I assist you today? I cleared my throat. My name is Gloria Benson. I need help accessing old transaction records. 5 years worth. Camille didn't ask why. She just said, of course. Do you have the account number handy? I read it off the back of an old statement. She clicked away in the background. Polite silence. Then, I see monthly transfers, same recipient starting in March 2020. Amount fund $109.50. Set up as a standing payment. Can you send me copies? I asked. Of all of them? Absolutely. Email or mail. Both. I gave her my address and tried not to let my voice shake. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet. The clock ticked above the fridge. Each second felt heavier. I opened my notebook, started a list. As Daniel's mortgage, start date March 2020, 109th month, dive 12 months of 5 years. I paused, swallowed. That wasn't the only one. SUP, car insurance, property taxes, grocery deliveries, recurring course costs, credit card payoff once. But huge. I flipped the page, wrote a new heading. Things I said yes to. The list stretched longer than I'd expected. And not just money, time, rides, favors. Conversations I hadn't had the energy for, but forced anyway because that's what mothers do. I sat back. Let the pages settle on the table. There was no anger now. Just clarity. One by one, I had given away every piece of comfort I'd earned. All in the name of love. But love, real love, shouldn't feel like erosion. I left the house around 2000. The envelope sat in my purse, creased but sealed. Daniel's name in my handwriting. No return address. The post office was nearly empty. One man ahead of me, mailing a stack of Christmas cards. The clerk greeted me with a smile that didn't need an explanation. I slid the envelope across the counter. One stamp, I said. First class. She weighed it, smoothed the flap down again, pressed the stamp like sealing a choice. That's it? She asked. That's all, I said. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves danced across the sidewalk, curling like old receipts. I got back in the car and turned left instead of right. Toward the bank. Inside, it smelled the same as always. Paper, carpet, the faint scent of ink. An older woman sat at the welcome desk. Her name tag said Marlene. I called earlier, I said. About old transactions. Camille helped me. Marlene nodded. She left notes. Have a seat. I'll print those copies for you. I sat across from her. Watched as she fed the printer sheet by sheet by sheet. 5 years of giving. Would you like these stapled? No. I'll organize them myself. She placed them in a folder. Thick, a little heavy, like a history textbook I hadn't realized I'd written. Anything else we can help with? I paused, then shook my head. No, I think I've done enough for today. Back in the car, I rested the folder in the passenger seat. Didn't buckle it. But part of me wanted to. The sun was starting to lower, that gold stretch before dusk. The kind Maria used to call truth hour. I drove home in silence. No radio. No news, just the hum of the engine and the rustle of papers every time I turned. At a red light, I glanced at the folder again. 5 years of sacrifice summarized in ink. But today, I'd sent the letter, and I'd taken back the receipts. I made tea before I did it. Not out of ritual, but out of respect. Chamomile, 1 sugar, the chipped white mug Maria used to love. I carried it to the table and opened my laptop. The login screen blinked at me. I typed slowly, deliberately. The banking dashboard loaded, balances, scheduled payments. There it was. The once $9.50 transfer, set for the 15th. Like always, pending. I clicked into it. The screen asked, "Do you want to modify or cancel?" My hand hovered. The cursor blinked. Waiting. I thought of Thanksgiving morning. That voicemail, Daniel's voice, detached and clean. "Just easier this way, Mom." I pressed cancel. A confirmation screen appeared. "This transfer has been successfully removed. No confetti, no fireworks, just a line of text, one less drain, one more breath." I took a sip of tea, still hot, a little too sweet. I didn't adjust it. I clicked over to my calendar, marked the 15th with a small note. Oscar kept my word. To myself, the heater kicked on. Outside, the sky was bruising, deepening into evening. I closed the laptop, folded the folder of bank statements, slipped it into the bottom drawer, under warranty manuals and old birthday cards, not to forget, just to move on. I stood by the window a moment longer. Porch light flickering. Same old bulb. But it looked different tonight. Like maybe, just maybe, I'd get around to changing it. He knocked just after sunset, 3 raps. Not hard, not soft. I opened the door, still holding the dish rag from drying plates. Daniel stood there, jacket unzipped, hair uncombed, eyes looking like he hadn't slept.
"Hi, Mom."
I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't invite him in. I was in the neighborhood. He added, like it was casual, like he hadn't vanished for weeks. "Cold out," I said finally, and stepped aside. He walked in like a stranger. Shoulders hunched, gaze darting to the walls, as if they'd say something for me. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded. I made it the old way, percolator, 2 mugs. Poured without asking how he takes it. We sat at the table. The same table where we'd once carved pumpkins, wrapped Christmas gifts, argued about curfews. Now it just held 2 mugs and 5 years of silence. He reached into his coat, pulled out an envelope. I saw the account was canceled. I sipped my coffee. Waited. I didn't realize it until the payment bounced. He pushed the envelope toward me. "It's all in here, numbers, timelines." Isabella did the math. "Over 110,000 odd wrong." I said calm. "It's closer to 140,000, not counting groceries, gifts, or weekends I paid your babysitter so you 2 could get away." He blinked. That quick, wounded look of a child caught red-handed but too old to cry. "We never expected you to keep paying," he murmured. I let the silence stretch. "Then why did you keep taking?" He flinched, opened his mouth, then shut it. "Was it that easy to cut me out?" I asked. "One holiday, one voicemail. It wasn't supposed to be like that," he said. "It was Isabella's parents. They're traditional. You know how they are." "Yes, I do." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how hard she tries to please them." "I do understand," I said, "but not at the cost of disappearing me." He stared at his coffee, both hands around the mug like a boy again. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "Because I wanted to believe you'd notice, that you'd realize what you were doing before I had to say it aloud." And when you did, I leaned back in the chair, felt the ache in my spine, in my knees, in the years. "I did what you taught me, Daniel. You remember what you told me when Dad left?" He looked up slowly. "People treat you how you let them." He closed his eyes. "That's what you told me." And I finally listened. Daniel exhaled. "You're right. I didn't notice. I didn't think about it. Not really." He rubbed his forehead. "The truth is we're in trouble." I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee. It had gone lukewarm. "The mortgage, without your help, we're 3 months behind. Isabella's car is leased. Her parents, they're pressuring us. They think we're irresponsible." I raised an eyebrow. "They said maybe we should sell, move somewhere smaller." He shook his head like that word tasted sore. "But we built a life there, Mom. The girls have their schools, their friends. I don't want to uproot them because I made bad calls." He looked at me, eyes glassy. "I didn't think it would all crash this fast." "Things do," I said, "when they're built on someone else's back." His voice cracked. "I came to ask for help." "No." His face froze. "I came to ask you to consider." "No." "Daniel." He blinked. "You don't even want to hear what I'm offering." "There's nothing you can offer, son. I've already paid enough." He leaned forward. "I'm not asking for forever. Just a few months, until tax season, until I can." I stood. His words trailed off. I walked to the sink, poured the cold coffee down the drain. "Do you remember when I had pneumonia?" I said. "Winter of 2019. You didn't come." He looked down. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to burden you. His voice was a whisper. I turned back. You weren't a burden. Not then. Not when you were 5 and broke your arm falling off the slide. Not when you totaled your first car. Not when you dropped out of school for a year. I paused. But I am one now. To you. To your wife. To the life you built that doesn't have space for me. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I sat again. I forgive you. His eyes widened. But forgiveness, I continued, doesn't mean restoration. It doesn't mean I go back to paying for a house I'm not welcome in. He looked stricken. I don't want to lose you. You already did, I said, soft but clear, when you picked silence over decency. He wiped his eyes. Can we fix it? I don't know, I said. Maybe. But you'll have to rebuild it from where you are. Not from my wallet, not from guilt. He nodded slowly. Okay, we sat a moment longer. Then he stood, put his mug in the sink like muscle memory. I'll call again, he said. If I don't answer, I replied, wait. Then try again. But not with your hand out. With your heart. He didn't hug me. Didn't dare. He just walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. Thanks for the coffee, Mom. I gave a small nod. He left. I locked the door behind him, turned off the kitchen light, and exhaled. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like truth, and that was enough. The phone stayed quiet for a week. Then another. Daniel didn't call, didn't text, didn't even forward the monthly family newsletter he always forgot to personalize. I checked the mail every morning, half expecting a letter, half dreading a bill with my name still wrongly attached. Nothing, just silence and junk coupons. I could have reached out, but I didn't. Instead, I cleaned out the hall closet, 4 coats too small, 3 umbrellas that didn't open right, boxes of photos I hadn't touched since before Maria passed. One afternoon, I found a birthday card from 2016. Daniel's handwriting was slanted and rushed. Love you, Mom. Always. I traced the words with my thumb, not to feel them, just to remind myself they were once true. Online, I noticed the whispers. Isabella had a new post. Aging gracefully is knowing when to let go of toxic energy, even if it's family. 74 likes. Catherine Jenkins among them. I laughed, sharp and short. Then I unplugged the router, left it off all weekend. No Facebook. No carefully filtered photos of my house in someone else's feed. No narratives rewritten to protect pride. Instead, I fixed the porch light. Finally got around to it. The new bulb clicked on without a flicker, casting a warm glow across the front steps. Felt like it lit something inside me too. The next morning, I rearranged the living room, moved the recliner closer to the window, brought Maria's old lamp out of storage, polished the side table we'd bought at that flea market in 1994. I found the box of records I'd almost donated last year. Played Patsy Cline while I scrubbed the kitchen grout. The lemon scent of cleaner mixed with old vinyl crackle in late afternoon sun. My back ached, my knees complained. But my heart was quiet. Not full, not empty, just steady. And for the first time in months, I felt like this house, this life, belonged to me again. The envelope was pale blue with my name written in careful script. No return address, but the stamp read Boise. I slid it open with the old letter opener Daniel made in woodshop. The blade still a little crooked. Inside, a folded card with pressed leaves on the front. Red oak, amber maple. Underneath, the words, "You are warmly invited to our autumn memories social at Golden Pines Senior Living." And Maria used to talk about that place. Said if she ever needed help someday, that was where she'd go. Not for the care, but the garden. They've got hydrangeas as tall as sin, she'd said once, and a staff that listens more than they speak. I set the card down, unsure if I was being invited as a guest or a potential resident. Either way, I didn't mind. The event was 2 days away. Saturday, 3:00 p.m. potluck, music, community, the invitation promised. I almost threw it out. Then I saw the RSVP number at the bottom, written in shaky handwriting. Cal Doris if you need a ride. By Doris. That had to be Doris Langley. We'd worked the church bake sale together for 10 years before her hip gave out and she moved to Golden Pines. I remembered her banana bread. How she used to sneak brandy into it, for depth. How she cried the day Maria passed, and left a jar of apple butter on my porch the next morning. I picked up the phone. She answered on the second ring. "Well, look who's still alive," she said, and I laughed. She picked me up that Saturday, wore a hat with velvet leaves and a brooch shaped like a turkey. "You look thinner," she said, not unkindly. "Less burdened." The common room smelled like cider and clove. Soft jazz played in the background. People milled about in sweaters and soft shoes. Someone offered me mulled wine in a paper cup. I sipped it slowly, watching the light from the windows stretch across the carpet. There was no talk of children. No one asked about mortgages or Facebook or whose daughter was better dressed. Just old songs and laughter that creaked a little and stories that didn't need validation. When the raffle ended and the sun began to fade, Doris leaned over. "You should come back," she said. "No pressure. But it's nice here. And you're still allowed to belong somewhere." I looked around the room. At the woman sketching near the fireplace. At the man humming along to Glenn Miller. At the empty chair next to mine. "I might," I said. "I just might." It arrived in the Monday mail, wedged between a catalog and the electric bill, a plain white envelope with a crayon star in the corner. I knew that handwriting, tall, loopy letters with too many curls. "Sophie." I slid my thumb under the flap and unfolded the note. "Grandma G, you feel like home. Love, Sophie," no punctuation. Just those 5 words and a heart drawn in red marker. My throat caught. I set the letter on the kitchen table, next to the chipped mug I'd been using all week. Maria's old mug. Still smelled faintly of chamomile and lemon. Outside, the porch light clicked on. Automatic timer. Still reliable, even when most things weren't. Sophie's note stayed on my table all afternoon. I read it while folding laundry, while boiling potatoes, while wiping down the counters with a rag that smelled of vinegar and orange. Around sunset, I opened the top drawer of Maria's desk. It stuck, like always, then gave way with a groan. Inside, painted years ago, with uneven brushstrokes and glitter that barely clung. "Porkhoiht open." Maria used to hang it from the railing every Thanksgiving. Said it was for neighbors who needed somewhere to go. "We're not a 5-star hotel," she'd joke, "but we've got soup and silence." I brushed the dust from the letters and carried the sign outside. The porch boards creaked beneath me. The wind carried the sharp scent of fallen leaves and someone's chimney smoke. I hung the sign gently, on the same hook she'd used. The wood swayed slightly, still strong. Inside, I made tea, opened a fresh notebook, started writing names. People who'd called, people who hadn't but had once mattered. People like Doris, like Sophie, and a few who'd never sent a thing, but might still be worth forgiving. I didn't know who'd knock, didn't know if anyone would. But the light was on, and the sign said what needed saying. The knock came at 9:42 a.m. 3 soft raps. Then a pause, then one more firmer. I opened the door to find 3 women, each holding something that didn't belong to me, but might have once. "Hope we're not too early," Doris said, holding up a pie tin. Still warm. Apple and cinnamon. Ruth gave me a shy nod. She had a battered notebook tucked under her arm. "Same floral cover from our church planning committee. Thought you might want this back. You led most of it anyway." The last was Heather, a retired schoolteacher with soft curls and louder earrings. She held nothing, just looked me in the eye and said, "I saw the sign." I stepped aside. The porch welcomed them like it remembered. The old swing creaked as Ruth sat down. Heather took the wicker chair. Doris handed me the pie. Inside, the kettle hissed. Outside, the wind shifted, bringing the scent of crushed leaves and wood smoke, and something like forgiveness. We drank tea from mismatched mugs, talked about nothing big. Books we never finished, movies that didn't deserve their endings. What arthritis felt like on rainy mornings. No one asked about Daniel. No one mentioned Isabella. They didn't need to. Heather pulled a pencil from her pocket, started sketching the porch in her notebook. Ruth added notes beside her. Doris reached for the basket of yarn I kept near the door, began a new scarf without asking whose it was for. We didn't call it anything. Not a club, not a support group, not a rebellion. But they came back the next Tuesday, and the one after that. Sometimes it was just me and the lamp and the empty chairs. But the porch light stayed on, for whoever needed it. That winter, I wrote a new sign, painted in soft blue strokes over fresh wood. "You feel like home." Sophie's words, hung right next to Maria's old one. 2 signs now, the old one for welcome, the new one for staying. Some things break, some things drift, but some things once lit never stop shining. I used to think love meant endurance. Staying, paying, swallowing. I thought if I just kept the peace, eventually someone would notice the effort, would look up from their busy, curated lives and say, she mattered. She held us together. But the thing about invisible glue is no one sees it until it cracks. And when mine did, I was the only one who heard the sound. There's a certain loneliness that comes when you realize the people you raised don't know how to care for you. Not really. They know how to need you. They know how to ask. But they never learned how to see you. When Daniel chose silence, I grieved the version of him I once held in my arms. The little boy who colored cards just for me, who whispered secrets into my hair at bedtime. That boy would have saved me a seat at dinner. That boy would have noticed the porch light left on. But people grow. And sometimes they grow away. I used to carry the shame of that, as if their drifting meant I failed, as if growing old made me obsolete. But it didn't, it just made me quieter, and sometimes quiet is where the truth lives. I don't miss the noise now, the pretending, the waiting for crumbs at someone else's table. I built my own table, set it for 4 on Tuesdays, sometimes 5, sometimes just me, and it's enough. Maria would have laughed at that. Only took you 6 decades, she'd say, and she'd be right. But healing doesn't have to be fast. It just has to be real. And this life I'm building now, with tea, stained mugs, and sunlight through linen curtains, and laughter that doesn't come at my expense. This is real. Legacy used to sound like a heavy word. I thought it meant money, or family name, or property passed down in tidy legal envelopes. But legacy, I've learned, is quieter than that. It's a lamp left on for someone who thinks no one sees them. It's a porch swing that creaks when the silence gets too loud. It's a place where stories don't have to be perfect to be honored. I used to wonder if I had anything worth passing on. My savings were gone. The house needed painting. No grandchildren called me Nana. But last week, Heather said something that stayed with me. She was binding one of her sketches into a little handmade book. I asked who it was for. She smiled and said, "For whoever comes next. For whoever comes next. Not a son, not a neighbor, not even someone she knew. Just someone." And I realized maybe that's what legacy really is. Leaving something behind that makes the next woman feel less alone. Not because you fixed everything, but because you refused to vanish. I look around my porch now and see signs of that quiet legacy. The scarf Doris finished and left folded over the railing. The drawing Ruth slipped into my mailbox with a note that read, "You saved me without even trying." And the sign I painted, still hanging beside the porch light. "You feel like home." Maybe that's what I was waiting to become all along. Not someone's servant. Not someone's backup plan. Not even someone's mother. Just a place where another tired soul could exhale and say, "I'm not the only one." If you're listening to this, and you've been told you're too much or not enough or only useful when needed, I see you. You are not forgotten. You are not replaceable. And you don't have to buy your seat at the table. Build your own. Hang a light, and wait. We find each other, we women who've carried more than our share. And when we do, we don't ask what you've lost. We just scoot over and say, "Come sit. Tell me your story," because that's legacy, and that's enough.